King Robert Baratheon's breath rattled in his throat like dice in a cup, each shallow gulp of air a reminder of how close the stranger had come to claiming him. The scent of blood and old sweat clung to the sheets, to the tapestries, and to the heavy drapes that lined the grand bedchamber. Torchlight flickered against the vaulted ceiling, carving out shadows on the walls that seemed to dance like ghosts at the edges of the king's vision. Robert blinked, mind drifting to the sound of steel on steel, to the taste of wine, to the hunts and the battles. He tried to speak. Words were thick in his mouth. His eyelids quivered, and for an instant, he thought he caught the faint smile of his old friend Eddard Stark, standing at the bedside. Then he coughed, deep and ragged, and the pain coursed through him anew. The boar's tusks had ripped a hole through his midsection, scouring out his strength faster than any battlefield wound he had ever known. It was a cruel, humiliating death for a warrior who had survived countless foes and rebellions, undone at last by his own overconfidence and too much strong wine. He fought to focus, the edges of his vision blurring as if night itself were pressing in. This final duty demanded clarity. When the hour grew grim, Robert Baratheon had to act like the king he was, not the roistering soldier who had once swung a warhammer with unstoppable might. So he beckoned Eddard closer, blinking the sweat from his eyes. Ned Stark stepped forward, all solemn resolve, his gray eyes reflecting only sorrow. Though their relationship had soured a shade in King's Landing, power, politics, and secrets always conspired to drive wedges between old friends. There remained a bond of trust between them. For Ned's part, the sense of duty was unshakable. He saw beyond the feasts, beyond the quarrels, saw the man who had helped him reclaim his sister's honor, who had fought side by side with him to topple the Targaryen throne. And in that moment, Robert reached a trembling hand for Ned's wrist. "Your Grace," Ned murmured, voice low and hushed, as if the gods themselves might be listening from the shadows. Robert's eyes were glassy, but an unmistakable determination flared in them. "Ned," he began, breath hitching, each word squeezed out between bursts of agony. "I have failed you." He tried to swallow, only to find a dry scratch in his throat. "Failed this realm. My wife Cersei, the Lannisters." Another rattle of breath. "Gods, the boar was not the only beast. You must protect the throne. Protect my son." Though the king's words were slurred by pain, Ned heard them well enough. He bowed his head. "I shall serve your grace, as I always have." The king's eyes fluttered. He gestured weakly at a piece of parchment on a nearby table, a heavy ring, the royal seal of House Baratheon, resting beside it. The white book of the Kingsguard lay half open. The air was thick with tension. Outside, beyond the bedchamber, came the muted clank of armor as gold-cloaked guards paced the corridors. They were Lannister men, Ned thought, and the knowledge unsettled him. "Joff," King Robert rasped, voice so faint that Ned had to lean in to hear. "He will need a man with honor. Will you be regent?" He coughed out a choking laugh, but his lips were parted in something akin to relief, as though naming Ned was the final good deed he might do. "Keep them in line. All of them." A hush fell over the chamber. Varys, slender and watchful in his voluminous robes, stood near the door. Peter Baelish loomed in a corner, too quiet, his quick eyes flicking between the king and the Lord of Winterfell. Grand Maester Pycelle hovered, fretful, wringing his soft hands at the king's every labored breath. Most of the small council had gathered, with Cersei absent. No doubt she was gathering her own allies, preparing for the inevitable power struggle. And yet, if Robert's word were law, then the matter might be settled before she so much as uttered a protest. Ned's eyes darted across the king's face, searching for certainty. This was not how he wished to serve. He wanted nothing more than to return to the north, to Winterfell, where the snow-laden pines and the quiet hush of his home gave him peace. King's Landing reeked of corruption, secrets, and power games that left him ill at ease. But Robert's eyes were pleading, and duty was duty. "I will," Ned said at length, voice gruff. He placed his hand gently on the king's. "So long as it is your wish." Robert nodded once, grimacing at a fresh wave of pain. "Write it," he commanded. "Write it, seal it with my ring, give it to the council. Ned Stark, protector of the realm and regent for my son until Joff is old enough to rule." A spasm of agony claimed him, bending him double as he grunted into the pillows. Ned quickly moved to the table, dipped quill in ink, and wrote down every word. At the king's insistence, the royal seal was pressed into hot wax. The document glistened, newly minted, when Robert sank back, tears of pain in his eyes. He wheezed out an exhalation, perhaps the last vestige of his strength. "I was never good at this," he muttered, breath-rattling. "But the realm cannot fall to her. Or them. You must hold it together." Eddard, his voice trailed off. His eyes closed. Thus did King Robert Baratheon pass from life, his final breath escaping with a soft sigh that mingled with the crackle of torches. Outside, the world still turned. In the courtyard below, the stables would be busy with the sounds of horses, men-at-arms, peddlers, and courtiers scurrying about, ignorant of the realm-altering moment that had just transpired. The hush in the bedchamber deepened until Varys cleared his throat and approached with measured steps. He looked from Robert's still form to Eddard Stark. "The king is gone," the spider whispered. "Long live King Joffrey." Ned swallowed hard, pressing a hand to the letter in front of him. With a slow breath, he turned to face the others. "The king's command is clear," he said, voice carrying a quiet authority. He held up the sealed parchment. "His last will, Ned Stark shall serve as regent for Joffrey Baratheon until the boy comes of age." Varys inclined his head, a small show of acceptance. Peter Baelish observed, silent and calculating, doubtless already weighing how best to weave this unexpected turn into personal profit. Grand Maester Pycelle looked taken aback, mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no words spilled forth. Outside, the voices of waiting guards grew louder, as though a tide of curiosity were lapping against the doors. Eddard Stark inhaled one last whiff of the death-charged air and steeled himself. The game had already begun. And he, a man who despised such games, had just been handed the highest seat at the table. He gathered what dignity he could and strode into the corridor, the parchment clutched to his chest like a shield against 1,000 hungry eyes. News spread like wildfire through the Red Keep. "The king is dead, the king is dead," came the whispers, scurrying from servant to servant, from guard to guard. And with it, the shocking addendum: "Lord Eddard Stark has been declared regent for the new King Joffrey Baratheon." The corridors of the keep surged with hushed speculation, and small pockets of talk formed in corners, behind pillars, in the half-lit hush of the castle's many halls. Every word bristled with tension. None could deny that this changed the balance of power. The Lannisters had long planned for Cersei to seize effective control the instant Robert breathed his last. But now, the king's own decree threatened to unravel their ambitions. Ned Stark walked resolute amid the chaos, flanked by 2 Stark guardsmen, men of the north whose loyalty he trusted beyond all else. The gold cloaks that once might have barred his way now looked upon him with new eyes, uncertain whether to bow or stand aside. Some had begun to doubt the surety of their alliances. The City Watch commander, Janos Slynt, often said to be in Peter Baelish's pocket, lurked near the top of the main staircase, fidgeting with the hilt of his sword. He offered Ned a curt nod, but his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. Outside the small council chamber, Ned paused, gathering himself. The door was guarded by a pair of Lannister men, their lion-crested armor polished to a high sheen. One of them stepped forward. "Lord Starka." "Stand aside," Ned commanded. He was not yet used to the bone-deep authority in his voice, but the gravity of Robert's final words lent him an unexpected steel. "By order of King Robert Baratheon, sealed in his last will, I enter as regent of the realm." The Lannister guards exchanged a glance. In the hush of that moment, the weight of the sealed parchment carried more force than a dozen swords. With sullen reluctance, they stepped aside. Ned entered the room, feeling every eye snap toward him. At the table sat Peter Baelish, Varys, Grand Maester Pycelle, and Renly Baratheon, the king's youngest brother. Renly's face was tight with worry, as though the death of his brother had wiped away his usual charm. There was one empty seat at the head of the table, a seat that had belonged to Robert. Another seat was vacant, presumably meant for the queen, but Cersei was nowhere to be found. Ned felt her absence like a coiled snake in the corner. Varys coughed softly. "Lord Stark," he said, with a gesture toward the empty chair. "We were discussing the matter of succession and other urgent business." "So I see," Ned answered, carefully laying the parchment on the table. He turned to Peter, then Renly, then Pycelle. "The king is dead." All four nodded, solemn. Pycelle's jowls quivered. "I have sent for the Silent Sisters," he declared, swallowing thickly. "And I have arranged to keep his body preserved as best we can until." Ned held up a hand. "We will speak of funeral arrangements in due course," he said. "But first, I bring the late king's decree." He broke the wax seal in front of them. "It states that Eddard Stark is named regent of the 7 kingdoms to rule in King Joffrey's name until the boy is of age. As Robert decreed, so shall it be." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Renly found his voice. "He named you regent?" A frown touched his lips. Cersei will not like this. Baelish let a thin smile ghost across his features. Indeed, she will not, he said, lacing his fingers together. The queen has no small ambition. She may question the authenticity of that document. Her father might as well. A fresh wave of concern pressed in on Ned. Yet he summoned his calm. Robert sealed it with his ring while the small council stood witness. There can be no question as to its legitimacy. The late king's will is law. And the boy, Joffrey, Pycelle said, voice almost trembling. He must be crowned soon, mustn't he? The realm needs stability after this shock. It might be wise to organize the coronation post-haste. I agree, Ned said. But in the meantime, as regent, I hold the king's authority. Let it be known throughout the keep and the city. Joffrey is to remain under my guardianship until the coronation to ensure the realm's smooth governance. I shall convene the small council thrice daily if need be to address all urgent matters. And I expect every lord and lady to abide by the late king's express command. Renly raised an eyebrow. A bold stance, Lord Stark. It is the only stance, Ned replied quietly. We must shield the realm from chaos. And I pray the queen remembers that Robert's last words were meant to prevent strife, not create it. Baelish gave a chuckle. Oh, I am certain the queen will have a most direct response. We can expect it soon. He leaned forward, letting his mocking tone drop. Shall I have the city watch confirm your authority? Ned dipped his head in a curt nod. A wise precaution. The Lannister men stationed here might be reluctant to obey me otherwise. Varys's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. We must be certain not to provoke undue confrontation, though. There is still the matter of Princess Myrcella and Prince Tommen, both of them well loved by the queen. And Joffrey himself, he is no simple boy, but a prince who has been much indulged. He may not take kindly to the notion of being guided by another. He will if he's wise, Ned said. Already he felt the weight of the crown, though it did not rest on his head. He thought of his own children, Sansa, betrothed to Joffrey, as well as Arya and little Bran and Rickon in Winterfell. Robb, his eldest, recently thrust into responsibilities far beyond his years. How he wished he could gather them all up and flee this viper's nest. But that was no longer an option. I will speak with the queen. Let her know that I have only the realm's best interests at heart. Renly offered a wry smile. Oh, to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. Ned said nothing to that. Instead, he lifted the parchment for all to see. Let us waste no more time. We must secure the Red Keep. Summon the City Watch, remind them their loyalty is to the throne, not to House Lannister alone. Then spread word to the lords of the realm. Let them know Joffrey is king, and I, Ned Stark, act as his regent by Robert's direct command. Outside, the shadows lengthened as though the castle itself was bracing for the storm that approached. Ned found the queen in the royal solar, a lofty chamber filled with bright afternoon light that filtered through tall windows overlooking the sea. Cersei stood at the window, hands clasped behind her back, her golden hair shimmering in the sun. Jaime Lannister leaned casually against a table, arms crossed, his golden hand catching a stray shaft of light. Beside him stood the hound, Sandor Clegane, massive and silent, half his face hidden by burn-scarred flesh. And in the center of the room, perched on a cushioned chair as though it were a throne, sat Joffrey. The boy wore a fine doublet of crimson and gold, the crowned stag and lion embroidered side by side. His bright green eyes flicked up at the sight of Ned, and a sneer twisted his lips. He enters without knocking, Joffrey said. A poor courtesy. Ned stood stiff by the door, aware that he had only 2 Stark guards behind him while the queen had 3 formidable Lannister men. But the parchment in his hand felt heavier than any sword. Your Grace, he said, inclining his head slightly. I come bearing your father's last orders. Cersei turned her gaze upon him, eyes cold as emeralds. My dear husband's death is fresh, Lord Stark. Could this not wait? Joffrey is mourning. Or do you consider that beneath your notice? There is no time to wait, Ned said, stepping forward. His voice was measured, careful. For the sake of the realm, certain measures must be put in place at once. The queen's stare did not waver. Beside her, Jaime's lips curled in a faint smirk. The air in the room hung heavy with implied threat. Then speak, Cersei said at last. Ned lifted the parchment. This is Robert's will. In it, he names Joffrey as his heir, of course, but also states that I, Eddard Stark, am to serve as regent and protector of the realm until Joffrey comes of age. Cersei's lips parted in something like a laugh, but no sound emerged. Joffrey's face went from sneering to dark puzzlement. Jaime rolled his eyes heavenward. The hound simply grunted. You presume to rule in my stead, Stark? Joffrey said with forced bravado, though Ned detected a quiver in the boy's voice. I am the king. Ned inclined his head again, just slightly. You are, your grace, and all kneel before you. But kings are often young when they inherit. Your father recognized the perils of inexperience and wished for a trusted hand to guide you until you can safely shoulder the burden yourself. Cersei stepped forward, slow and regal, the train of her gown gliding over the marble floor. "Let me see this, Will," she said, extending a hand. Ned offered it to her. She examined the parchment with narrowed eyes. There was Robert's seal, stamped in wax, clear as day. She glanced at Ned with open contempt, and then she tore the parchment in two. The sound of ripping paper cracked through the stillness like a whip. A hush fell. She let the pieces flutter to the floor. "Paper," she said with a dismissive toss of her hair, "can be destroyed. And from what I see, it looks very much like your hand, Lord Stark, not Robert's. This might be forgery, or forced from him while he lay delirious. I will not have my son's authority challenged by a piece of parchment." Ned's jaw tightened. That was the king's word, sealed by his ring. The small council can attest. "I care not what the small council says," Cersei hissed, voice dropping to a dangerous pitch. "I am the queen and Joffrey is the king. My father is Warden of the West, the wealthiest and most powerful lord in the land. Do you think this little gambit of yours will go uncontested? Do you think the Lannisters will stand by while a Stark usurps power?" "It was Robert's wish," Ned said, an edge creeping into his voice despite his best efforts. "Not mine. I would have preferred never to leave the North. But your husband charged me at his deathbed with this duty, and I will not abandon it. Joffrey remains the king, but I am regent in accordance with that final command." Joffrey rose from his chair. The boy's face was flushed, eyes bright. "I am king," he spat. "I will not be ruled like a child. Mother, give the order, and I'll have his head for treason." The hound's lips twitched, Jaime's smirk widened. The tension coiled as though invisible swords were being drawn. But Cersei held up a hand, halting them. She advanced until she stood mere paces from Ned, so close he could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. Despite the anger etched across her face, she radiated a calm, icy control. "You do realize," she murmured, "the city watches under my influence. The men in this castle are many of them sworn to House Lannister. Shall we see how far a torn parchment goes if I order them to seize you?" Ned felt his two guards shift behind him, uneasy. But he raised his voice, projecting calm authority. "The gold cloaks are sworn to the crown," he said. "Not to you, nor to Tywin Lannister, but to the throne. You would be raising arms against the very testament of the late king. Besides, I've already taken steps to secure loyalty where it matters." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. Then she took a measured breath. "So you'd provoke a battle here in the Red Keep in front of Joffrey's eyes when we should be united in mourning? Would Robert have wanted that?" "No," Ned said steadily. "Nor do I. I only want to honor his final commands. There's no reason the Queen cannot continue to advise Joffrey, cannot assist me as regent, so long as we do so for the good of the realm. I do not seek to displace him as king, only to govern until his next named day or the one after, whatever is deemed wise. Then I'll gladly step aside." Cersei studied him for a long moment, her gaze penetrating. Something flickered behind her eyes, contempt, perhaps, or a grudging assessment of what was possible here and now. Joffrey hovered at her side, fists balled. Jaime, still leaning, had not moved, but Ned could sense the Lannister knight's readiness to draw steel in an instant. At last, the Queen spoke. "You say you want no battle, yet you come to me with demands. The realm is uncertain, you risk making it more so. Joffrey is king. If you truly wish to serve him, then name yourself his hand. Be content with that. But regent," her tone dripped with scorn. "It is not for me to name myself," Ned answered. "It was Robert's will. I ask you only to honor it." Cersei's stare hardened. Then she turned sharply to Joffrey. "My sweet son," she said, her voice shifting to a softer register, though it held a razor's edge. "Lord Stark claims he was named your regent. What do you say to this?" The boy's eyes flicked from Ned to his mother. A muscle twitched at the corner of his mouth. "He may play at regent," Joffrey spat, "but I am king and I'll not suffer insults. Let him hold the title if he wants, but if he crosses me, I'll show him what happens to traitors." He advanced a step, shoulders hunched, as though he expected Ned to bow. Ned held his gaze. The child's face twisted with a flicker of uncertainty. If Joffrey expected him to tremble, he would be disappointed. This, too, must have been something Robert intended, for Ned to counter the boy's worst impulses. The memory of Sansa's tears when Joffrey tormented her rose in Ned's mind, reminding him how dangerous the boy could be even before a crown rested on his brow. Cersei touched her son's shoulder. "You have heard the king," she said, turning back to Ned. "He indulges you in this fancy for now. But mind yourself, Lord Stark, or we shall find ways to correct your course." Ned inclined his head in acknowledgement. The dance was far from over, but for the moment an uneasy truce settled. At length he stepped back, his voice firm. As regent, I will call a meeting of the small council within the hour. You and the king are both welcome to attend. I trust you will. Cersei said nothing, though her silence spoke volumes. Jaime only stared at Ned with cool amusement while the hound grunted and looked away. Joffrey's lip curled, but no further threats came. Ned gave a curt nod to his guards, then took his leave, stepping out of the solar and into the corridor. His heart was pounding with pent-up tension, but outwardly he held to the stiff composure of a lord. Already his mind churned with the many moves that must be made to keep peace in King's Landing, to ensure that the Lannisters did not wrest control of the throne by force or guile. He thought of Robert's final words and wondered if the dead king's last commands would suffice to keep this fragile realm from splitting like an old tapestry. At high sun, Ned convened the small council in the Tower of the Hand, seeking more secure ground. He did not yet trust that the queen would not fill the council chambers with her own men, nor did he trust every servant in the Red Keep. Better to gather here, in a hall with loyal guards posted at every door. Varys arrived first, gliding in with polite bows and vaguely encouraging murmurs. Peter Baelish followed soon after, wearing a knowing smile. Grand Maester Pycelle lumbered in, still red-eyed from the news of Robert's death, or so he claimed. Renly Baratheon arrived last, face grave. I have seen the king, Renly said at once. He was with Cersei, naturally. The boy was scowling fit to burst. Didn't like hearing you call yourself regent? No, Ned replied, he did not. Then the rumors are true, Renly said. Robert named you protector, but the queen defies the decree? She attempted to destroy it outright, Ned answered, watching the flicker of reaction cross the faces of those gathered. Tore the parchment to pieces and threatened me with the city watch. But Joffrey has, for the time being, grudgingly accepted that I am to be regent. Renly frowned. That acceptance will be fleeting, brother-in-law. I doubt it can withstand the Lannister scheming. Varys touched his fingertips together. We must tread with caution. The Lannisters have the gold, the influence in the city, and a fearsome capacity for swift, brutal solutions. Queen Cersei will not let control slip away without a fight. And the king's siblings, Pycelle said in a low voice, clearing his throat, what of them? Stannis is at Dragonstone, and we have heard little from him of late. My lords, we should consider whether he might press his own claim if he believes Joffrey is unfit. Ned suppressed a sigh. Already the realm threatened to split apart at the seams with questions of legitimacy. He recalled the dark suspicion that had gnawed at him for weeks. Joffrey and his siblings were not Robert's true-born children. But to bring that up now would be to spark immediate war. Perhaps Robert knew, perhaps not. Yet in naming Joffrey his heir, the king's final command was plain. Ned was determined to honor that last wish and, in doing so, preserve peace. It is best if we avoid talk of Stannis or Renly's claims, Ned said. We have a named King Joffrey, and my regency is Robert's dying wish. If we hold to that, the realm need not tear itself apart. Our duty is to ensure a peaceful transition. The coronation is paramount. Let us proceed with that as soon as possible. Peter Baelish steepled his fingers, lips curling in a thin smile. A coronation indeed would unify the people. They love pomp and ceremony. With your permission, Lord Regent, I will see that the crown's coffers are open to fund the event. Ned nodded, though he disliked the way Baelish spoke his new title. There was always a hint of irony in Peter's voice, as though the man found the entire spectacle amusing. Very well, arrange what you must. We'll have a grand funeral for King Robert, followed by an equally grand coronation for Joffrey. On that, we can agree, Renly said. But in the meantime, brother, do you intend to remain in the Red Keep? The king's tower is vacant, but you have the Tower of the Hand. I hear the queen has been eyeing the king's tower as a vantage from which to watch your every move. Ned managed a tight smile. I will stay in the Tower of the Hand for now, guarded by my own men from the north. I trust that is no problem. Baelish chuckled. None at all, unless you wish to provoke an incident by having foreign men roving the castle halls. But let us not stoke paranoia. After all, we're all friends here, are we not? Renly snorted and turned his head away. Varys spread his soft hands in a gesture of peace. Pycelle murmured something noncommittal. Ned stood, letting the tension in his bones fortify him rather than weigh him down. We proceed then. Grand Maester, see to it that ravens are sent to each corner of the realm, announcing Joffrey's ascension and the arrangements for Robert's funeral. Varys, you will ensure the keep's staff has what they need for the ceremonies. Baelish, you have your task for the coronation. Renly, he met his brother-in-law's gaze. I would ask that you stand beside the new king at court. Show a united Baratheon front. Let the realm see that Robert's kin do not contest the matter. Renly dipped his head in agreement, though a flicker of something uncertain crossed his face. For the good of the realm, he said quietly. And I, Ned continued, will speak to Joffrey myself about the coronation, about his immediate duties, about the realm at large. He may be king, but he is still a boy who requires guidance. He surveyed them all. His voice carried the burden of his solemn vow to his dying friend. Let us do as Robert wished and avert bloodshed. Over the following days, the Red Keep became a hive of activity. Courtiers and visiting lords from across the realm arrived to pay respects to the dead king and to witness the crowning of the new one. Wagons of supplies rumbled through the city gates, bearing food, wine, cloth, and banners. The great hall was scrubbed, polished, and adorned with sigils of the stag and lion, though Ned made sure to include the dire wolf of House Stark in certain corners, a subtle reminder of his own authority. The streets of King's Landing thronged with the restless poor, who eyed the keep's opulence with weary resentment. Fears of unrest simmered beneath the surface. Soldiers patrolled in greater numbers to maintain order, and Ned mandated that the gold cloaks, rather than Lannister men, be given the prime posts within the castle. Cersei tolerated these changes with cold silence. When she and Ned exchanged words, it was in curt, polite tones, each reminding the other of courtesies and obligations. Joffrey, on the other hand, seemed to delight in provoking Ned whenever possible. He would summon the regent at odd hours to demand trifling changes, more lavish decorations, additional knights at his personal guard, special privileges for his favored courtiers. Each time, Ned calmly weighed the request, sometimes conceding minor points to keep the peace, other times refusing outright and leaving the boy red-faced with fury. Sansa tried to soothe Joffrey's temper, but Ned could see that the union between them was brittle. Even so, it was a link between House Stark and House Lannister that might help maintain peace. Arya, for her part, sulked at being cooped up in the castle. She spoke her mind too freely for Ned's comfort, especially when it came to Joffrey. If the boy overheard her barbed remarks, there would be trouble. Amid the hustle, Ned found a moment to slip away and stand in the courtyard below the Tower of the Hand. He watched the gold cloaks drilling, the sun high overhead. The wind carried the smells of sweat, horse dung, and distant fish markets. He closed his eyes, longing for the crisp air of the north. But he did not have that luxury now. King Robert's ghost loomed large in his mind, and with it, a fierce sense of duty. Behind him, Baelish's soft footsteps approached. Lord Regent, Peter said, the faintest lilt of mockery in his voice. Taking the air, I see. Perhaps we should build you a godwood of your own in the keep. Ned opened his eyes. A poor jest, he said quietly. What do you want, Baelish? Baelish smirked. Only to remind you of the city's fiscal constraints. The costs for the upcoming ceremonies have ballooned. The crown was already deep in debt when dear Robert lived. Now, with his funeral, Joffrey's coronation, plus the demands for feasting and spectacle, we risk plunging into further debt. I thought it prudent to bring that to your attention, my lord. Ned regarded him. I'll talk with the master of coin. Oh, wait, that's you. So manage it as best you can. Perhaps ask the Lannisters for a gracious loan if they wish the new king's glory to shine bright. Baelish only chuckled. Clever. I will see what can be done. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, a bit of friendly advice, if I may. The queen grows restless with the limit of her influence. The king is rumored to be quite frustrated by your refusal to indulge his whims. If you push them too far, they might push back in a manner you cannot counter with a piece of parchment. Ned set his jaw. Robert's will is law. If they mean to violate it, let them show themselves for the traitors they are. Baelish let out a theatrical sigh. Such nobility. It will be the death of you, Ned Stark. Then he left, footsteps echoing on the stone as he returned to the castle halls. Ned exhaled, quietly unsettled. He had no illusions about the precariousness of his position. The Lannisters were powerful, cunning, and not lacking in allies. Still, the will of the late king was a formidable shield. So long as he held the moral and legal high ground, any open move against him would be seen as a coup, risking the condemnation of other great houses. That alone might stay the queen's hand at least for a time. He turned back to the training yard, watching the men practice. The ring of steel filled the air, a grim music to his ears. Battle might still come, whether by stealth or open conflict, but he prayed the gods would grant him time enough to steer the realm away from that fate. For that was his vow, to hold true to Robert's last words and preserve the fragile peace. On the day of King Robert's funeral procession, the skies were gray and heavy as though the heavens themselves mourned. The Silent Sisters bore the late king's body, wrapped in gilded cloth embroidered with black stags. A hush fell over the city as thousands lined the streets to pay final respects or simply to satisfy their curiosity. Bells tolled in the distance, a low thunder that reverberated through hearts and bones alike. Joffrey and his retinue followed the bier, the new king robed in crimson and gold with a circlet of gold resting upon his blonde curls. Cersei walked beside him, black veil draped over her golden hair, her lips set in a thin line. Ned followed close behind in formal Stark attire, the direwolf sigil Stark upon his doublet. Sansa trailed him, face pale as a winter moon, while Arya was kept back at the castle after a fierce argument. She was deemed too wild to appear at such a solemn occasion, especially given her scorn for Joffrey. The Great September of Baelor opened its massive doors and the procession entered. Hundreds of candles flickered around the interior, bathing the marble columns in a soft glow. In the front row, lords and ladies of the realm gathered, all wearing solemn faces, or at least feigning them. Renly and Ser Barristan and Selmy helped guide Robert's body to its final place of rest in the Sept's sanctuary. The High Septon intoned the prayers, calling upon the Seven to welcome King Robert's soul. The crowds joined in hushed unison. Ned's gaze shifted from the sacred rites to the flickering candlelight on Joffrey's face. The boy wore a mask of gravity, though Ned suspected he was bored by the entire affair. Indeed, Joffrey's eyes occasionally darted to the side, seeking an escape from the endless prayers. Cersei, on the other hand, was still as stone. In that moment, Ned could almost believe she was truly grieving, but the coldness in her eyes belied any real sorrow. When the last prayer was said and Robert Baratheon was laid to rest, the High Septon turned to Joffrey. "Your Grace," he said, voice echoing in the cavernous sept, "you succeed your father as king of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. Will you come forward to receive the Seven's blessing that you may rule with wisdom and justice?" Joffrey's chin lifted. He stepped forward, guided by the High Septon, to the altar. Cersei trailed, though she lingered a few steps behind. Ned took that as his cue to move forward as well, to stand near the new king, a silent witness to the oath. Behind him, the hush deepened and all eyes were upon the boy who would wear the crown. "I do," Joffrey said, voice clear. "I swear to uphold the law, to defend the realm, to honor the gods." He hesitated a fraction of a second, as though the words tasted odd on his tongue. Then he continued, "And to protect the weak, so long as I shall reign. This I vow in the sight of gods and men." The High Septon nodded, solemn. "Then by the grace of the Seven we anoint you king. May your reign be guided by their light." He dipped his thumb in holy oil and made the sign of the Seven upon Joffrey's brow. Then came the crowning itself, a new crown wrought of gold with rubies and black diamonds, symbolizing both House Baratheon and House Lannister. The High Septon placed it upon Joffrey's head. "Behold," the High Septon called, "Joffrey of the houses Baratheon and Lannister, the first of his name, King of the Undulls and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the realm. Long may he reign." A chorus rose, "Long may he reign." Many in the sept bowed, others knelt. Ned Stark inclined his head in respect. He saw Joffrey glance about, soaking in the adoration, youthful pride gleaming in his eyes. The hush was broken by a smattering of applause, subdued but present. Cersei stepped forward, pressing a kiss to Joffrey's cheek. The boy accepted it with a kind of smug satisfaction. Ned allowed himself a tight smile, relieved that the day had gone without incident. This coronation was the symbol the realm needed to stave off immediate chaos. So long as Robert's decree stood and Ned served as regent, perhaps they could navigate these treacherous waters. When the ceremony ended, the crowd began to disperse and the new king, flanked by his mother and a retinue of Lannister men, made his way out to the awaiting royal wheelhouse. Ned observed the parted crowds from a distance. He saw the hush in their expressions, the uncertain glances, the murmurs that followed the glint of golden lions. Many still wore their sadness openly at Robert's passing, while others looked on Joffrey with curiosity or fear. But for now, the realm had a king and, by the late king's word, a Stark regent behind him. Ned took a deep breath of the cool air outside the September. The next phase awaited, a new dawn that might bring either precarious peace or the first seeds of war. King Joffrey's first court session took place 2 days later in the throne room. The Iron Throne loomed tall, each twisted sword glinting beneath the shafts of sunlight that filtered in from high windows. The boy king sat stiffly, robed in gold-trimmed crimson, his new crown perched on his blonde hair. Cersei stood at his right hand, face serene but eyes watchful. Ned stood at his left, flanked by men of the King Guard, a nod to the new order. Ser Barristan and Selmy was present, and near him stood Jaime Lannister, resplendent in gilded armor. Petitions began. Minor lords, merchants, and knights came to address the new king, presenting disputes over land, debts, and claims of wrongdoing. Joffrey tried to project an air of regal authority, but Ned watched him fidget and smirk at times, betraying a child's boredom. Whenever a matter of significance arose, Ned offered discreet counsel, murmuring suggestions to the king in as respectful a tone as possible. Joffrey occasionally followed the advice but often threw it aside if it did not appeal to him. Cersei merely looked on with a half-smile. At length, a group of commoners approached, petitioning for relief from increased taxes in the wake of the funeral and coronation expenses. Joffrey sneered at them. "The funeral of a king and the crowning of his successor are grand occasions," he said, voice imperious. "Why should I care if you must pay a few more coins? The realm must have gold if I am to rule it properly." One of the bolder men stepped forward, kneeling. "Your Grace, I mean no disrespect, but we are poor men. Coin doesn't come easy. Bread is dearer each day. We beg your mercy." "Mercy?" Joffrey's laugh was sharp. "If you cannot pay, then you can starve." "I care not." A hush fell over the court. Ned stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Your Grace, these men come in good faith. Perhaps a slight easing of the new levies would buy great goodwill among the city's folk. With your permission, we could reconsider the rate." "Are you contradicting me, Lord Stark?" Joffrey snapped, eyes blazing. "I am king. I decide. Not you." Ned felt Cersei's gaze upon him, her amusement plain. A flicker of tension rippled through the onlookers. In that charged moment, Ned recalled that the boy's father, Robert, would have had a kinder ear for such pleas. But Robert was gone, and Ned faced his impulsive son, trying to fulfill a promise to protect the realm. "I merely advise, Your Grace," Ned said, bowing his head. "All is done in your name." Joffrey sank back against the Iron Throne. "Then do not question me," he hissed. He waved a hand. "Dismissed. Let them pay or let them rot in flea bottom. I don't care which." The commoners were shepherded out by guards, faces pinched with fear and anger. Ned could sense the murmurs of discontent building in the hall. He glanced at the king's mother, who only offered a slight shrug, as though to say, "You wanted to be regent, manage him if you can." The rest of the session proceeded similarly. Joffrey alternated between capricious cruelty and yawning indifference, seldom granting the kind of measured justice Ned had hoped to instill. By the end of the day, the boy was restless, demanding to be dismissed from the throne so he could hunt or hawk. Ned couldn't quite catch which. Cersei, hiding a faint smile, consented. She announced the end of court, and the petitioners left largely unsatisfied. When the hall emptied, Ned and Cersei faced each other before the Iron Throne, the metal seat looming behind them like a silent judge. Jaime Lannister and several guards lingered, though at a discreet distance. "I trust you see the challenge now," Cersei said, arching a brow. "You asked to serve as regent, but the king has his own mind. He doesn't want your guidance, and you have no power to force him." Ned let out a slow breath. "He is yet a boy. With time, perhaps he'll see reason." Cersei's tone softened in a way that was almost pitying. "Oh, Lord Stark, reason is not something Joffrey cherishes. He admires power, spectacle, and the praise of sycophants. That is how you influence him, not with talk of justice." Ned stood silent for a moment. Then he turned on his heel, leaving the throne room with measured steps. His mind churned with the conversation, with Joffrey's cruelty, with the hostility that the queen barely bothered to disguise. Robert might have died in that boar hunt, but the truly dangerous beasts still prowled these corridors, gilded and beautiful, with teeth sharpened by cunning. He needed to protect not only the throne, but his own family from their bite. As the moons turned, Ned found himself locked in an endless struggle to rein Joffrey's impulses without provoking outright rebellion from the boy, all the while maneuvering around Cersei's stratagems. The Lannisters never made an overt move to remove him, likely aware that seizing power openly would brand them traitors, but they undermined him at every turn. If Ned tried to reduce the debts piling upon the city's small folk, Cersei announced a lavish festival to celebrate Joffrey's name day. If Ned attempted to discipline one of the gold cloaks for corruption, Joffrey intervened, praising the man instead. Rumors circulated that the Lannisters planned to bring more troops into the city, an idea Ned swiftly countered, forcing a small council vote to refuse any additional forces in King's Landing without the regent's approval. Still, tensions simmered. Sansa and Arya found life in the Red Keep more stifling than ever. Sansa tried to fulfill her ladylike obligations, but Joffrey's temper flared unpredictably, leading to humiliations that reduced her to tears. Arya refused to hold her tongue, and Ned had to reprimand her strictly lest she provide the Lannisters an excuse to call the entire Stark brood traitors. Meanwhile, news from the north was scarce, though Ned received a letter from Robb detailing matters at Winterfell, no great troubles, but a sense of foreboding that matched Ned's own. One evening, Varys slipped into Ned's solar like a wraith. "My Lord Regent," he purred, "I have tidings that may interest you." Ned set aside the dull ledger he'd been poring over. "What tidings?" Varys darted a glance around the room, ensuring they were alone. It concerns the movements of Tywin Lannister. Word travels that he has called his banners. Officially, it is said he merely intends to bring order to certain lawless border regions. But the numbers gathered exceed any typical campaign. If he marches, the crown would be wise to know why and where. Ned's stomach tightened. If Tywin brought his forces east, to King's Landing, that would be a blatant challenge. If he means to challenge me, I'll not stand alone. Many houses remain loyal to the crown's rightful regent. Varys nodded, smiling in that unctuous way of his. Of course, though the alliances of certain houses are known to shift if they see advantage in it. And Tywin's gold is vast. Ned exhaled slowly. We must prevent open war. If it starts, it will not easily be contained. Just so. One wonders if you have considered the possibility of removing Joffrey from Cersei's influence for his own safety and that of the realm. A regent might take the king on a tour of the Seven Kingdoms, for instance. A valuable chance to build goodwill and keep him away from certain whispers. Ned paused. The idea had merit. If Joffrey were removed from the constant manipulations of his mother, perhaps Ned could guide him more effectively. But it also risked provoking the queen into open hostilities. Kidnapping the king, he could almost hear the Lannister outrage. I must weigh that carefully, Ned said. The boy is surrounded by Lannisters in the keep, yes, but removing him might spark the very conflict we hope to avoid. Varys's soft footsteps retreated as he gave a short bow. I trust you will choose wisely, my lord. The spider hears many threads trembling on the loom of fate. War is but one rumor away if we are not careful. Then he slipped away, leaving Ned alone with his thoughts. That night, Ned tossed in his bed, mind plagued by the swirl of possibilities. He thought of Catelyn, far from this pit of vipers, and how he wished she were here to share the burden. He thought of his promise to Robert, the vow that bound him to do everything in his power to see the realm safe under Joffrey's rule. Yet the realm stood upon a knife's edge. Tywin Lannister's muster, Joffrey's cruelty, the rising unrest in the streets, any of these could tip the Seven Kingdoms into chaos. In the darkness, Ned wondered if a single piece of parchment bearing a dead king's seal could truly hold back the tide of war. But as the hours dragged on, a steely resolve kindled in his chest. The die had been cast. He could not walk away. He was regent, sworn to uphold Robert's last decree. For better or for worse, Eddard Stark of Winterfell, Lord of the North, stood at the head of the realm, guiding a petulant boy king while the vipers circled. Duty was a heavy cloak, but he would wear it if it meant preserving the peace that thousands of innocent souls depended upon. And if the Lannisters moved to tear that peace asunder, if Tywin marched, or if Cersei struck in the night, then Ned would not yield and the North would rise to stand behind him. Come what may, he would keep his word to Robert Baratheon, even if the cost was everything he held dear. A hush lay over King's Landing like a coiled serpent, every corner of the Red Keep bracing for tensions that might erupt at any moment. Eddard Stark felt that hush acutely each time he stepped into the corridors, each time he sat in council or stood in the training yard. With Robert Baratheon gone and young Joffrey Baratheon crowned yet perched perilously on the Iron Throne, the city stirred with rumor and fear. Men and women alike whispered of trouble on the horizon, of Tywin Lannister mustering forces in the west, of lords across the realm trying to gauge which way the scales would tip. And Ned Stark himself walked a knife's edge as regent, upholding King Robert's final decree. The smallest misstep could plunge the realm into war. He had no illusions about Joffrey's temperament. In the weeks since the coronation, the new king had shown neither wisdom nor restraint. The boy's cruelty surfaced in small but telling moments, laughing at a fallen knight during a spar, mocking petitioners who came with pleas for mercy, and blatantly ignoring Ned's efforts to guide him toward fair governance. Whenever Ned pressed him too hard, advising leniency, urging reforms to ease the burdens on the small folk, Joffrey's green eyes would blaze, and he would rail that he was king, that no one could tell him what to do. Often Cersei Lannister stood at his side, a sphinx's half-smile upon her lips, neither openly defying Ned nor assisting him. The tension between regent and queen was so thick that no one in the Red Keep could miss it. Still, Ned strove to fulfill his promise. He had sworn to the dying King Robert that he would safeguard the realm by serving as regent until Joffrey came of age. Mere days after Joffrey's coronation, Ned wrote to all corners of Westeros, reminding the great houses that the king sat the throne uncontested under the protection of Eddard Stark. Ravens flew to the north, to the Vale, to Riverrun, to the Stormlands, and yes, to Casterly Rock. Some letters were cordial, others firm, but the subtext was the same in each. The king is a boy and needs time to grow into his crown. The peace of the realm must be preserved. Whether those letters had the desired effect remained to be seen. Uncertainty abounded. Lords tested the winds. The Lannisters, for their part, neither recognized Ned's authority nor openly denied it. Cersei continued to speak in sly half-acknowledgments, twisting words until they meant both everything and nothing. Tywin Lannister's mustering was the worst-kept secret in Westeros, but so far he had not marched east. Some claimed he was waiting for word from the capital, others that he intended to let the realm settle into a false peace before striking. Ned maintained vigilant watch, dispatching his own ravens each time rumors came that Lannister bannermen had assembled, or that troops were on the move. He had his allies on the small council, Renly Baratheon chiefly, though Renly was not always present in King's Landing. Ser Barristan Selmy offered quiet but steadfast support. Even so, the council was riddled with potential pitfalls. Grand Maester Pycelle often bent whichever way the Lannister wind blew. Peter Baelish was an enigma, and Varys, well, the spider served his own designs, weaving webs that extended in all directions. On a crisp morning in early autumn, Ned took his place in the small council chamber, determined to seize whatever chance he had to steer the realm on a safer path. He'd ordered the meeting, sending gold cloaks to summon every council member. Outside, the city roused itself from slumber. Hawkers pushing carts full of mussels and crabs, blacksmiths hammering steel, tavern keepers opening their doors. But within the Red Keep, the day's business concerned the fate of kingdoms. Peter Baelish arrived first, impeccably dressed, offering his usual mocking half-bow. Varys came next, gliding in like a shadow with that unreadable smile. Grand Maester Pycelle followed, face puffed with importance, and Renly soon after, tugging off his riding gloves. The seat at the far end of the table, reserved for the Queen, remained empty. Ned surveyed them. "Good," he said, breaking the silence. "We're all here, save the Queen. Let us proceed." "The Queen has grown weary of constant council sessions," Pycelle ventured, clearing his throat. "She believes it an overreach, if I may speak frankly, my Lord Regent." "You may," Ned responded. "And the Queen is free to ignore these meetings if she wishes, but the governance of the realm continues. She can hardly fault us for that." Baelish smoothed down his doublet. "Still, it's wise not to stir her displeasure too much. In King's Landing, overreach might well spark unintentional consequences. I trust you've had enough of those, Lord Stark." Renly huffed, dropping into a chair. "We've all had enough, and we're all quite aware that House Lannister stands behind Joffrey like a wolf at the lambing pen. Let us not mince words, my lords. We're here to keep the ship afloat. So can we address the reason you summoned us?" Ned allowed a small nod. "Very well. Two matters demand our immediate attention. First, the continuing muster of Lord Tywin's forces. We have word that he's gathered some 10,000 men near the Golden Tooth, and still more from the local lords. If he advances toward the Riverlands, we risk open conflict with House Tully, and if he advances toward King's Landing, we risk far worse." Varys interlaced his fingers and gave a pensive sigh. 10,000, you say? My little birds have heard that Tywin's numbers may be closer to 12. He has not set them marching yet, though caravans of supplies flow in from Lannisport and the Westerlands. Whispers suggest he's awaiting confirmation of how events unfold at court. "Yes," Ned said. "He waits to see if the crown remains stable or if he'll have justification to claim a regency by force. We cannot allow that. My next measure is to send an envoy to Casterly Rock to demand an account of Tywin's intentions. If he's merely pacifying local raiders or the remnants of outlaws, fine. But if not, we must warn him that the crown will not tolerate a private army poised to move on the capital." Baelish tilted his head, faint amusement in his eyes. "A bold letter. Would you prefer me to draft it? Or shall you write it in your own blunt fashion, my Lord Regent?" Ned's gaze was cool. "I'll write it. Then I recommend some measure of courtesy," Baelish continued. "You know Tywin Lannister's pride. If you brand him an enemy prematurely, he will not soon forget the slight." Renly snorted, as if Tywin Lannister needs an excuse to take offense. "Let him brood. The realm can't be forced to tremble just because the old lion roars." Pycelle stirred, his voice quavering. Still, a measure of caution might be best. Lord Tywin does not do anything in half measures. He holds great sway. Should he see this as an insult? Ned cut him off gently. I will phrase it carefully, but the demand must be clear. The king's peace is threatened by mass mustering on the outskirts of the Riverlands. We need to know why it continues. If Tywin is loyal to his grandson, the true king, he'll have no trouble offering a reassurance. Varys steepled his hands. So that is the first matter. The second, if I recall, concerns the unrest in the city. Ned inclined his head. Yes, as you know, Joffrey insisted on heavier taxes to fund a grand name day tournament. He wants another spectacle on top of the coronation. The small folk are struggling. Bread prices have soared. Already, we've seen an uptick in street brawls, petty theft, even small riots. The gold cloaks can only quell so much unrest. I suggest we lower the taxes on basic necessities. We'll have to find coin elsewhere. Baelish gave an exasperated sniff. Elsewhere, of course. Where do you propose we conjure such coin? The crown's debts remain vast, and the king's appetite for extravagance is not shrinking. We'll have to cut costs, Ned said simply. Reduce the scale of any new feasts or tourneys. The realm can ill afford them. I've tried to make Joffrey see reason, but he insists on the lavish. If he will not yield, we must ensure the people don't starve beneath the weight of his demands. Renly flicked a glance at Pycelle. And what does the Grand Maester say? The city's health is precarious. If bread grows scarce, we risk real riots. Pycelle cleared his throat. I have heard from the alchemists that they, too, are troubled by the sense of rising discord. Rumors abound of famine, though they might be exaggerated. Still, I advise caution. Perhaps we can bring the matter to the queen. She might persuade the king to adopt a gentler approach. Baelish laughed softly at that. You hold out too much hope, Maester. If the queen sees advantage in letting the small folk suffer, she won't lift a finger unless it suits her. But if we present it as a potential threat to Joffrey's popularity, she might intervene, if only to avoid an ugly revolt that tarnishes his reign. Ned tapped the table. Then let us do just that. I'll meet with the queen directly today, if possible, and lay out the consequences. There's no sense pretending all is well. If we keep strangling the city, we'll face a crisis. Varys spoke up softly. One caution, my lord regent. Present your argument with care. The queen is not apt to take direction, least of all from you. She'll see it as interference with her beloved son's glory. If you can make her believe that curbing the extravagance was her idea, she's more likely to relent. The notion of bending words and feigning deference to Cersei unsettled Ned. He was not gifted in such manipulations. But the realm was at stake. I will do what must be done, he said. Is there anything else before we adjourn? Renly spoke up, only that the city watch remains uncertain in its loyalties. Janos Slynt is a creature of coin, and Baelish here has no shortage of coin. If anyone can keep the gold cloaks from turning Lannister, it's Baelish. But I'd feel better if we had some measure of personal loyalty. How many men can you muster from the north, Ned? Ned exhaled. I sent word to Winterfell. Robb can gather a force if needed, but I don't wish to bring a northern army into the capital. That would be as provocative as Tywin's muster, just from the other direction. We want stability, not escalation. Perhaps a smaller retinue, then. A personal guard loyal to you alone, Renly pressed. Stark men you trust. That might dissuade the gold cloaks from turning if the queen makes a sudden grab for power. Baelish flashed a grin. You assume the queen hasn't made a silent grab already. A dark sense of foreboding filled Ned's chest. Still, he kept his tone calm. I'll see what can be arranged. We must avoid bringing open conflict into King's Landing, but I will not be caught unprepared. He glanced around the table. If nothing else, we stand together for the realm's peace, do we not? A round of lukewarm nods followed. Ned knew better than to trust all of them wholeheartedly, but for now, their interests aligned. No one wished for the bloodletting that a Lannister coup could bring. So the small council disbanded, and Ned resolved to corner the queen before she could slip away again. He intended to test whether she truly cared about Joffrey's popularity among the small folk or whether her ambition ran deeper than any of them guessed. He found her in the gardens beside the Red Keep's eastern walls. The air tasted of salt drifting off Blackwater Bay, and gulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing in the mid-morning light. Cersei stood beneath a rose-draped trellis, wearing a gown of deep blue that contrasted sharply with her golden hair. A pair of Lannister guards lingered at a respectful distance, spears in hand. She turned slowly when she sensed Ned's approach, a slight arch to her brows. "You come alone, Lord Stark," she said lightly. "That's brave or foolish?" "Perhaps neither," Ned replied. "You are the queen after all. Shall I fear you more than I fear the city itself?" She inclined her head. "You should fear what any mother might do if her child's throne is threatened. We are both parents, Eddard. I imagine you understand that well." Ned hesitated. She had a way of shifting every discussion into a confrontation or a test. "I've come to speak about the city," he began carefully. "The king's decisions have placed an onerous tax upon the small folk. That burden is fueling unrest. I worry it could turn violent." Cersei examined a blooming red rose, running her fingers over the petals. "Are you here to blame me for it? I told Joffrey he should lavish gifts upon the people after his coronation, but he insisted the funds go into the tournament. He wants the greatest knights in the realm to vie for his favor." "Gifts would have been a wiser course," Ned said quietly. "As regent, I must ensure the city remains stable. I intend to roll back some of the new taxes on bread and flour. We can fund the king's tournament with more modest means." Her green eyes slid over him, the faintest flicker of displeasure evident. "As regent, you say? And does the king concur?" Ned forced a measured tone. He need not concern himself with the minutiae of coin. "He's the king, yes, but by Robert's decree I hold authority over governance until Joffrey comes of age." Cersei's grip on the rose stem tightened until thorns pricked her fingers. She didn't flinch. "A piece of paper can be torn, Lord Stark. Ink can be misplaced. Robert's will is ephemeral. Joffrey sits the Iron Throne in his own name now." Ned did not miss her meaning. Still, he pressed on. "Nonetheless, the realm expects me to fulfill that final command. Even you have acknowledged it, tacitly if not in so many words. If we cannot cooperate in small matters such as taxes, the realm will suffer." Her lips curved, though the smile did not touch her eyes. "Very well, my Lord Regent. If you wish to reduce these new levies, do so, but you will have to justify the shortfall in the treasury. The king's tournament draws near, and if Joffrey's named day spectacle proves lackluster, he'll resent you all the more." Ned kept his composure. "We can find the funds from the crown's other revenues. Or Lord Baelish can scramble as he always does. But yes, the tournament will likely be smaller than planned. It's that or see the city starve." She released the rose, a tiny bead of blood welling on her finger. "You speak of starving as though a handful of tradesmen whining about high prices equates to a famine. The city has endured worse in the past. Still, if it pleases you to ease their burdens, do as you must. I will ensure the king does not blockade your measure. He might throw a tantrum, but I will handle him." Ned felt a flicker of relief at this small concession. "Thank you," he said, voice subdued. "It's good to see we can agree on something." "Don't mistake me," Cersei added. "I yield only because it serves our interests. Joffrey's reign cannot begin with a riot, especially not in the city named for his grandfather. A wise mother prevents her children from playing with fire. But do not presume that I bend the knee to you." "I wouldn't dream of it," Ned said, though he suspected she would prefer the realm's entire population on its knees, so long as it gave her an advantage. Cersei offered a final, cutting smile. "Then we understand each other." She swept away, her guards trailing after her, leaving Ned in the garden with the scent of roses and salt in the air. He exhaled slowly, pondering the thorns that pricked both of them. Cersei was yielding on taxes, yet that was only a minor front in a much larger conflict. The real question was whether she intended to let Ned remain regent unchallenged or whether her father's armies would soon march to displace him. And the last thing Ned wanted was open war. The only path, as he saw it, was to remain vigilant, keep the realm stable, and pray that Joffrey did not do anything rash. Another fortnight passed in uneasy quiet. Ned's measure to lower the cost of bread and flour calmed the city somewhat. The gold cloaks reported fewer riots, though pickpocketing and petty theft still ran high. The rumored name day tournament for Joffrey moved forward, albeit on a reduced scale. Instead of a grand affair lasting a week, it would be 3 days with fewer champion purses. Joffrey complained at length, threatening to have Ned's head for undermining my festivities, but in the end, the queen soothed him with talk of how the entire realm would still turn its eyes toward King's Landing in awe. So the boy sulked, yet grudgingly accepted it. Ned poured most of his spare hours into the business of sending letters and envoys, striving to keep tabs on the lords scattered across Westeros. The Vale was quiet, with Lisa Arryn holed up in the Eyrie, apparently uninterested in meddling. The North was at peace under Robb Stark's watchful eye. The Riverlands under Hoster Tully remained cordial, though rumors that Tywin might move through that region kept Lord Tully's bannermen on edge. The Reach remained neutral so far, but Mace Tyrell was known to watch every shift in the balance of power. If war flared, Highgarden would pick a side only when it seemed profitable. Dorne was aloof, as always, still nursing ancient grudges about Princess Elia and the sack of King's Landing years before. Stannis Baratheon remained at Dragonstone, silent and unresponsive to the ravens Ned had sent. As for Renly, the youngest Baratheon had returned to court but spent more time in merriment than in official duties. Such was the board on which Ned found himself playing. One dawn, as Ned broke fast with Sansa and Arya, a messenger arrived in haste. Arya had been chasing her sister around the room moments before, brandishing a crust of bread as if it were needle, but froze when the messenger bowed low at the door. Sansa looked up with hope in her eyes. Perhaps she expected news of some new gown or a courtly event. Her life in the capital was a swirl of illusions that Ned sometimes pitted. "My Lord Regent," the messenger said, voice trembling. "A letter for you. It bears the seal of Riverrun." Ned took the parchment, excusing himself from the table. His daughters watched with curiosity as he stepped to a window for light. He cracked the seal, a leaping trout embossed in wax, and unfolded the letter. The script was that of Ser Edmure Tully, Lord Hoster's heir. "My Lord Stark, I write with urgent news from the Riverlands. Our outriders have reported increased activity along the border with the Westerlands. Armed bands, likely Lannister men under lesser bannermen, have raided small villages, burning crops, and seizing goods. I fear this signals a prelude to open conflict. My father's health wanes and he is loath to commit to war in his condition. We beseech the crown for protection. Tywin Lannister's host remains at the Golden Tooth, but these outrages cannot stand. The small folk cry out for justice. In the name of House Tully, I implore you to intervene before this escalates further. If the crown will not act, we may be forced to defend ourselves, and so a spark could become an inferno." Signed, Ser Edmure Tully, acting Lord of Riverrun. Ned felt a chill. If Tywin's men were testing the waters with raids, war might come sooner than he had feared. Setting the letter aside, he walked back to the table, forcing himself to keep calm for Sansa and Arya. The girls waited expectantly, but he merely placed a hand on each of their heads gently. "Go on," he said. "I must to the council. Eat your breakfast before it grows cold." "But father," Sansa began, eyes wide. Arya, always observant, caught the tension in his face. "What's happened? Is it trouble?" Ned hesitated. He did not want them burdened with the realm's strife. "Only matters of state," he said. "Do as I say." His tone left no room for argument, and both girls withdrew, uneasy but obedient. In minutes, Ned left the Tower of the Hand with 2 Stark guards in tow. He needed the small council's immediate attention on this. If Tywin Lannister's men were truly raiding across the border, that was a direct affront to the crown's peace. It could not be dismissed as banditry. He strode through the corridors, stone walls echoing his footsteps, mind awash with the possibilities. War might break out within days if the Tullys felt compelled to retaliate. And if that happened, it would be open season for every lord with a grievance, north to south. He pushed into the council chamber without ceremony, ordering a steward to gather the members. Baelish appeared quickly, drawn by the whiff of crisis. Varys followed, face solemn. Pycelle arrived in a shuffle of robes, complaining about the early hour. Renly was absent, off hunting or carousing, but Ned sent a page to find him. Then, at last, they gathered around the polished table. Ned placed Edmure Tully's letter in the center. "Read this," he said tersely. Baelish picked it up. As he scanned the contents, his smirk faded. "Raids along the border. That's no good." Varys took the letter next, silent as his eyes flicked across the words. "If these are indeed Lannister bannermen, Lord Tywin is playing a dangerous game." Pycelle peered over at the parchment. It could be merely a few rogue knights. The Westerlands has its share of ungoverned men. Perhaps we need not assume a full-scale incursion. Ned grimaced. Edmure Tully would not write in alarm if it was mere brigandry. House Tully's outriders know the difference between bandits and armed men in Lannister colors. This is a clear provocation. "And so what do you propose?" Baelish asked lightly, though his gaze was sharp. "Summon the king to dispatch the royal army? Or do you, as regent, intend to ride forth yourself?" Varys's voice was gentle. "A direct confrontation could be precisely what Lord Tywin hopes to provoke. If you march the royal forces into the Riverlands, the queen will claim you're overstepping. She might persuade the king to brand you an aggressor. We must tread carefully." Ned pressed his fingertips to the table. "If the Lannisters are raiding, we cannot stand idle. The Tullys are my wife's kin, and more importantly, they are loyal to the crown. The realm must protect its subjects from any marauders, Lannister or otherwise." Baelish lifted his shoulders. The surest remedy would be to call upon Tywin to answer for these raids. Summon him to court. If he refuses, that speaks volumes. If he comes, we can demand restitution. Ned's jaw tightened. I've already sent him letters demanding to know why he's mustering men. He has not replied. Summoning him in person might be equally fruitless, but we can try. Meanwhile, House Tully cannot remain under attack. Perhaps a royal proclamation threatening severe punishment for unlawful raids would give Tywin pause. Or amuse him, Baelish countered. But yes, let us try. At worst, we show the Riverlands that the crown did not ignore their plight. Varys angled his head. And if the raids persist? Will you send men under the royal banner to chase the raiders? So how many? And who commands them? Ned paused. Dispatching a segment of the royal army, such as it was, had far-reaching implications. King's Landing's garrison was not vast, perhaps a few thousand at most, mostly gold cloaks who were city watch, not field soldiers. If he sent them out, the city might be left vulnerable. If he tried to raise a proper host from local lords, that could take time and might appear as though the crown was mobilizing for war. Yet doing nothing was unthinkable. The Tully letter all but pleaded for protection. Honor demanded that the king's peace be upheld. I will speak to the king, Ned said at last. We will issue a royal proclamation declaring these raids illegal, that any man found bearing Lannister colors while pillaging shall be labeled a criminal. If the raids do not cease, I will dispatch a small force, 200 men perhaps, to assist House Tully in defending those villages. Not an offensive host, but enough to deter further attacks. Varys nodded. That may be wise, though the queen will see it as a threat to her father's designs. Baelish stretched his arms out languidly. Let her. If Tywin Lannister truly intends war, he'll find a pretext no matter what we do. At least this way we uphold the crown's duty. Ned exhaled. A small force only. Enough to show we mean to protect the innocent. I will not allow the Riverlands to burn simply because we fear Tywin's wrath. Renly burst in then, clothes rumpled from hurried dressing. What's this about Tywin Lannister? He asked, eyes sparking with curiosity. Ned gave him a quick summary, and Renly cursed under his breath. The realm needs a strong king, not a child who lets his grandfather wage war by proxy. Varys spread his hands. A fact we all understand, Lord Renly. Yet the child is the child, and the mother stands behind him. Our dear regent must navigate carefully. Ned felt the weight of it all pressing down. I'll see Joffrey as soon as possible. The queen too, if I must. We'll proceed with the proclamation and prepare a contingent for the Riverlands, if need be. With that decided, the council broke up. Ned left quickly, not bothering to mask the grim set of his features. War loomed closer with every passing day, and if it came, the Seven Kingdoms would bleed. His mind drifted to his wife, Catelyn, and how she would feel knowing that her father's lands were under threat from her own daughters-in-laws. Duty wedded to duty, and behind it all, young Joffrey's crown perched atop a shaky throne. Finding Joffrey proved more difficult than expected. Word was that he'd gone hawking early that morning with the Hound, Ser Marentrant, and a small retinue. Ned waited in the throne room, half hoping the king would return soon, but an hour passed with no sign. Finally, a page breathlessly reported that the king was spotted outside the city walls, near the Kingswood. Ned, vexed, resolved to ride out and meet him in person rather than wait. If Joffrey was ignoring his duties, that was precisely why Ned needed to impress upon him the seriousness of the situation. He donned a warm cloak, summoned a handful of Stark guards, and rode out the Iron Gate. The morning sun had risen high, gilding the fields near the city, though a hint of autumn coolness tinged the breeze. They crossed the open ground quickly, following the directions of peasants who had glimpsed the king's party heading into the woods. Soon, Ned and his men found a small glade where Joffrey, the Hound, and several courtiers lounged on horses, apparently having finished a hawking display. No hawks were in sight, perhaps they had lost them or grown bored. Joffrey stood near a small stream, letting his fine crimson cloak trail in the leaf-strewn mud. The Hound hovered behind him, expression unreadable. "My Lord Regent," the Hound rumbled by way of greeting when he saw Ned approach. Joffrey turned, face scrunching into a scowl. "What do you want, Stark? Can't you see I'm at my sport?" Ned reined his horse to a stop. "Your Grace," he said curtly. "I've been seeking you since this morning. Affairs of state require your presence." Joffrey gave an exaggerated groan. "I'm sick of affairs of state. It's all you ever speak of." Do this, do that, don't do this, sign that parchment, greet that gaggle of whining peasants. I'm the king, not you. Why can't you see that? Ned glanced at the hound. Sandor Clegane's scarred face was impassive, but there was something in the big man's eyes as if he were watching for any sign of disrespect to the boy. Yet Ned refused to be cowed. I am regent only by your father's last command. But that does not change the reality. You are king, and with that comes responsibility. Joffrey flicked a glance at the courtiers around him, 2 young lordlings from the Westerlands, a pair of knights in Lannister livery. They wore smirks as though egging him on. I'd rather take my hawk out again. It's more fun than hearing you prattle. Didn't my mother say you'd handle all the trivial nonsense? That's why father named you regent, so I could do as I please, yes. Ned kept his patience, reminding himself this was a child. Your Grace, the trivial nonsense is actually quite pressing. We have letters reporting that men in Lannister colors have been raiding villages in the Riverlands. Houses loyal to the crown are under attack. As king, you must proclaim your condemnation of these raids and demand they cease. Joffrey snorted. Raids? So what if some peasants get robbed? They're just farmers. Let them defend themselves or flee. What do I care? Ned's temper flared. He fought to keep his tone level. You must care because they are your subjects. The realm depends on a king who protects the innocent. If you allow your bannermen, even those of your mother's house, to pillage at will, the lords will turn against you. Joffrey turned to the hound, ignoring Ned for a moment. Clegane, do you care about a few worthless farmers in the Riverlands? The hound's voice was a gravelly monotone. If they're not paying me or feeding me, I don't see the use in them, your grace. A smattering of laughter rose from the young lordlings. Ned felt disgust coil in his stomach. Your grace, I must insist. Fine, Joffrey cut him off. Draft whatever nonsense you want. I'll sign it if you must. But do not drag me into some petty squabble. My father was always warring, always crossing the realm with a hammer in hand, and look how he ended up, gutted by a boar. I'm not about to dash off into the mud for some peasants. A flicker of sorrow washed over Ned at the mention of Robert. The memory of that final, pained moment lingered. Still, he pressed on. You need only stand firm in the throne room and proclaim these raids criminal, your grace. Let the realm see that its king stands for order. Then, if necessary, a small contingent of the city watch can be dispatched to assist House Tully in curtailing the raids. Joffrey's lip curled. The city watch? Huh. As if that pack of gold-cloaked curs can handle real knights. But do what you will, Stark. Just spare me the details. I have more entertaining things to attend to. He waved a hand, dismissing Ned as though he were a stable boy. Clegane, come, I want to see if there are any boars worth hunting deeper in the woods. Your Grace, the hound said, though his tone held no enthusiasm. Ned opened his mouth to protest, but Joffrey turned his back and strode toward the horses, already barking orders at one of the courtiers to fetch his hunting spear. The knights in Lannister livery glanced at Ned with thinly veiled contempt, then followed. The hound paused only a moment, meeting Ned's eyes with a look that might have been pity or indifference, then followed Joffrey. Ned remained by the stream, watching them go. The small group rode off with whoops and laughter, the king leading the way as though playing at being a real huntsman. Ned set his jaw. So be it. He had the boys' grudging approval to act in the realm's defense. That would suffice. He had no illusions that Joffrey would actually stand in the Great Hall and make a dignified proclamation. Still, a public stance by the crown could be arranged. Ned would stand on the dais and read the royal words if necessary. He turned back to his men. They, too, wore the expressions of those who had overheard every disrespectful word. One guard spat on the ground. He's no king, not in his heart. Ned reined in any outburst. He bears the crown, and we will treat him with due courtesy, he said, voice edged in warning. What's done is done. We have our business. Without further delay, he led them back to the city, mind roiling with the confrontation's aftermath. Joffrey's disdain could not be more obvious. If the realm was to avoid war, Ned realized he might have to act quickly and decisively, without the king's involvement. That might well push Cersei closer to an open break. But the alternative was letting Tywin Lannister run amok in the Riverlands, which would be disastrous. The specter of bloodshed loomed with each new day. By dusk, Ned had penned a proclamation in the king's name, condemning any raids as treasonous acts against the crown. He sealed it with Joffrey's sigil and intended to read it in the Great Hall on the morrow, summoning as many lords and knights as were in the capital. The next step was to organize a modest force, some 200 men of the city watch, supplemented by a few knights from the royal household, to stand ready to ride to the Riverlands. Ned scrawled orders to Janos Slynt, instructing him to select trustworthy men for this mission, and also wrote to Ser Edmure Tully to expect their arrival if the raids continued. He found himself in the solar of the Tower of the Hand, surrounded by flickering candlelight and reams of parchment, when Sansa knocked timidly. "Father?" Her soft voice carried through the door. "Enter," Ned called, pushing aside his many letters. She slipped in, pale in the yellow glow, her auburn hair brushed to a shine. She wore a worried expression, hands clasped at her waist. "I heard a rumor that you argued with Joffrey outside the city. The ladies at court were whispering." She paused, biting her lip. "Are you in danger? Is our betrothal threatened?" Ned's heart went out to her, still so young, so entangled in illusions of a perfect courtly romance. "Sansa," he said gently, "the king and I have a difference of opinions on governance. That does not mean you are in danger. I swore to protect you, and so I shall." She approached the table. "But Joffrey, he has a temper. And the queen is always so cold. Sometimes I fear they hate us, father. And I want to be a good queen someday. If I must marry him, I want it to be a happy union." Ned rose from his seat, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Little bird," he said, using the affectionate name he'd once used when she was even younger, "do not fret over such talk. Marriages in the realm are often political. If Joffrey remains king, you will be queen, yes, but do not imagine that it will be like a song. Life at court can be harsh." She lowered her gaze. "Arya says that too. She says I'm just believing stories." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "But sometimes I'm afraid. He can be cruel." Ned wished for the 1,000th time that Robert had never arranged this betrothal. But it was done, and undone only at a cost. "If he is ever cruel, you must tell me," Ned said, voice firm. "I will not have you mistreated, not even by a king." She nodded, tears threatening to spill. "Thank you, father." Then she glanced at the letters on the table. "Are you sending men to fight in the Riverlands?" He considered how much to tell her. "I am sending men to protect innocent folk from raids. That is the crown's duty, and I must see it done. There is much tension. But you needn't worry yourself over it. Keep your head high in court and be courteous to the queen." She sniffled, wiping her eyes. "Yes, father." Then she curtsied, turning to leave with quiet steps. Ned watched her go, sorrow tugging at him. In the north, she might have grown into a woman more gently, away from all these intrigues. But here, innocence was chipped away daily. He breathed a long sigh, returning to his letters and the flickering glow of the candles. Night deepened. Outside, the city's lights twinkled against a black sky. Ned felt the weight of the realm press on his shoulders. He had no taste for these shadowy games, for the duplicity of King's Landing. But he would endure them if it meant upholding Robert's final charge. He could only pray that the small show of force, 200 men, a royal proclamation, would serve to quell Tywin's ambitions or at least prevent a bigger spark from igniting. Too many times he thought of that old saying, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. Ned Stark would do everything in his power to avoid losing. Word spread fast of the crown's new proclamation. On the appointed morning, the great hall was crowded with courtiers, knights, and small folk representatives. Ned took his place before the Iron Throne, uncomfortably aware that Joffrey was nowhere to be seen. The king had apparently decided to sleep in after a night's feasting, leaving Ned to speak on his behalf. The symbolism was not lost on the onlookers. Grand Maester Pycelle stepped forward to open the proceedings with pompous decorum. "Hear ye, good people of King's Landing and visiting lords from afar, the regent, Lord Eddard Stark, speaks in the king's name. Attend to his words, for they bear royal authority." His voice echoed in the vaulted space, bouncing off pillars and rippling through the throng. Ned stood, parchment in hand, stern-faced. Over the sea of heads, he spotted Cersei near the dais, flanked by Jaime Lannister and other loyalists. She regarded him with that same cool expression, arms folded across her embroidered gown. He wondered if she would interrupt or challenge him. But she remained silent. He began to read, "Be it known that our loyal subjects in the Riverlands have come under attack by raiders. It has been reported these raiders bear the colors of House Lannister, yet their actions defy the king's peace. Therefore, by the authority of King Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name, any such attacks are to cease immediately. Those who persist shall be deemed traitors and face the crown's justice. A contingent of the royal guard shall ride forth to protect these lands, ensuring the safety of our subjects. May all who value the realm's peace obey this command." A wave of murmuring swept through the hall. Some looked surprised, others uneasy, especially those in Lannister colors. Cersei's face darkened a fraction, but still she did not speak. Ned continued, Let it also be known that we reaffirm the Crown's commitment to the well-being of all citizens in King's Landing. Recent burdens on bread and flour have been lifted by royal decree, ensuring no man, woman, or child starves under the rule of King Joffrey. The King's Name Day tournament proceeds as planned, though scaled to prudent measure that all may celebrate without fear of want. Signed and witnessed by my hand, Eddard Stark, Lord Regent, serving in the name of King Joffrey. He lowered the parchment. The hush endured, broken only by the rustle of cloth and the clearing of throats. Then, in a decisive tone, Ned announced, "These orders take effect immediately." Cersei stirred, stepping forward, her posture regal. "And where's my son, the king, on this momentous day?" Her voice was loud enough for all to hear, laced with faint challenge. Ned forced a tight smile. "His Grace is occupied with other matters. He has entrusted this decree to me." A faint titter rose from the crowd. Some saw the irony of a king absent from his own rulings. But in a city so full of intrigues, few dared laugh openly. Cersei's green eyes flashed in the torchlight. "Indeed," she said, letting the single word drip with scorn. Then she turned and walked away, Jaime at her shoulder, gold cloaks swirling behind them. Ned signaled the gold cloaks to disperse the crowd. Quietly, with the official reading done, people began filing out, some wide-eyed at the apparent confrontation between Regent and Queen, others exchanging hushed gossip about raids, rumor, and politics. Once the hall was nearly empty, Ned took a moment to gather himself. A mild success, perhaps, but success nonetheless. Varys appeared at his elbow. "Well played, my lord," the spider whispered. "A formal condemnation of the raids, read in full assembly, is not something Tywin can ignore. If he continues his forays, his men will be branded traitors indeed. Perhaps he'll pause to reconsider." Ned hoped so. "And if not, we'll have to ride out." "And if that happens," Varys said, "the seeds of war are well and truly sown." Ned nodded grimly. "I know. But we cannot let fear of war be an excuse to let innocent folk burn." Varys's gaze flitted around the emptying hall. "You've grown used to this game quickly, Lord Stark. A pity it has such an appetite for devouring honorable men." Ned said nothing in reply. He stepped down from the dais and headed to the side passages. He needed to ensure Janos Slynt was actually preparing the chosen men, confirm their readiness, and perhaps see if Renly Baratheon might volunteer some of his own knights to bolster the force. The tasks of a regent were endless, and no matter how quickly he moved, there always seemed to be another snare lying in wait. As evening fell, Ned visited the training yard to oversee the selection of the 200 gold cloaks who would ride under the royal banner. Captain Janos Slynt waddled about, barking orders at his men. Slynt was a short, stout man with a bulbous nose and a penchant for bribes, but he had thus far complied with Ned's instructions. A group of prospective watchmen gathered, testing gear and arms. Some were older veterans, others raw recruits. Ned stepped among them, offering quiet words of caution. They were not to harass small folk nor provoke any fights, but to defend only. They would be under the command of a reliable knight, Ser Jacelyn Bywater, who had proven himself more principled than many in the watch. Bywater nodded, meeting Ned's gaze with a sober, steady assurance. "All's in readiness, my Lord Regent," Bywater said, helmet tucked under one arm. "We can depart in 2 days if the situation demands." Ned clasped his shoulder. "Good. I pray you do not need to see battle. But if the raiders persist, House Tully will be glad of your assistance." Slynt approached, bowing with stiff deference. "Lord Regent, I've done as asked, but some of my men grumble. They say the Lannisters pay better coin than the crown. You can't keep them loyal on pride alone." Ned's face hardened. "They will do their duty to the king. If you find any man refusing, replace him. There are enough honest men left in King's Landing who'll serve for the wages we can provide." Slynt shrugged. "As you say. But keep in mind, gold has a way of swaying loyalty in this city. If the Lannisters want to sabotage your little expedition, they might outbid you." Bywater shot Slynt a warning glare. Ned said, "Thank you for that reminder, Captain. Let's hope for the best." With that, he turned and left, ignoring Slynt's self-important grumble. The man had cunning eyes, always measuring how best to profit. It was no secret that Peter Baelish had purchased Slynt's loyalty in the past. Now Ned needed to rely on him to an extent which left a bitter taste. But there were few alternatives. An army of Northmen was too far away, the king's own household guard was not large enough for field duty. So the gold cloaks would have to do. He stepped from the yard into the adjacent walkway where the last rays of sunlight slanted across the stones. Renly was there, leaning against a column. "You have a soldier's gait tonight," the young Baratheon lord remarked, folding his arms. "Striding about with fury, are you?" Ned paused. "Tiredness more than fury." "I heard about your proclamation," Renly said. "Cersei was spitting nails when she left the Great Hall. Jaime Lannister threatened to cross swords with any man who calls his father a traitor. How long can this tension hold before it snaps?" Ned looked away. "That depends on whether Tywin halts the raids. If he does, the tension might ease. If not..." Renly chuckled darkly. "You'll have a war. The Lannisters are not the type to yield because of a decree. Tywin might even welcome open battle if he thinks Joffrey and thus the crown will stand with him. And that is the question," Ned agreed quietly. "Will Joffrey side with me or with his mother if Tywin raises open arms? The boy is enthralled by her and he hates me. The impetus might be enough to brand me as a rebel, ironically, for defending the realm's laws." Renly tapped his fingers on the column. "Then perhaps we should consider another course. If Joffrey is so unfit to rule, if the Lannisters are poised to plunge us all into war, we might find a better Baratheon for that throne." He raised a brow meaningfully, letting the silence linger. Ned frowned, instantly guarded. "What do you mean?" "Oh, come now, Stark. You're no fool. My elder brother Stannis is Robert's true heir if you discount Joffrey for certain reasons." Renly glanced around to ensure no one else was listening. "But Stannis is not well-loved, nor is he adept at forging alliances. I, on the other hand, have a certain popularity. The Stormlands might rally to me. The Tyrells might support me if approached correctly. If King's Landing stands behind me, well, I could make a claim for the throne. It wouldn't be the first time the realm put aside one branch for another, especially if the first was incompetent or illegitimate." Ned felt a rush of unease. "That is treasonous talk, Renly. I am sworn to uphold Robert's final command. Joffrey is king." Renly's eyes flashed. "Is he Robert's son, though? You suspect the truth, I know you do. Joffrey's hair is as golden as the Lannister line, not a trace of Baratheon darkness in it. I remember reading in the old genealogies that Baratheon seed is always black of hair." "Itsy." "Enough," Ned said. He stared hard at Renly. "Even if that were true, Robert named him heir, and I swore to respect that. I will not undermine Joffrey in favor of you or Stannis, no matter the personal cost." Renly studied him, disappointment flickering. "You hold to your vow even if it means a Lannister stranglehold on the boy on the throne, on the realm?" "I do," Ned said. "I can't tear the realm apart on the basis of rumors. If we want stability, we must abide by the last king's word." For a moment, Renly looked as if he might argue further, but then he sighed. "Your honor is unyielding, Ned Stark. I see now why Robert cherished you and also why Cersei hates you. You're a boulder blocking her path." Ned shook his head. "I'm only trying to keep the realm from fracturing. If war breaks out, thousands will die. I'd see that avoided if I can." Renly set his jaw. "I share that wish, but I'm not convinced your approach will save us. Still, I'll stand with you for now. If you need a few knights from my household to bolster your expedition, say the word." Ned felt a surge of relief. That would help. Tywin might think twice if he faces not only the gold cloaks but also knights loyal to a Baratheon. "We ride under the king's banner, after all." Renly nodded. "I'll send a dozen good men under one of my more sensible captains. They'll join your 200 watchers. Let's hope it never comes to a proper battle." With that, he pushed off from the column and left, footsteps echoing in the twilight. Ned stood there, gaze drifting toward the horizon. Renly had spoken treason openly, but Ned suspected it wouldn't be the last time. If the realm's illusions shattered, if Joffrey's parentage were proven false, if Tywin advanced, if Cersei made a direct move, lords might flock to a different Baratheon banner. Ned only prayed it wouldn't come to that. War was a beast that, once unleashed, devoured all in its path. He wanted no part in crowning a different king, not after Robert's dying breath had compelled him otherwise. And so he squared his shoulders, braced by the cooling autumn air, and marched back into the Red Keep. He would see his orders done. Let Tywin Lannister do his worst and let the realm decide if it had room for more bloodshed. Eddard Stark would stand in the breach until he could stand no more. 2 days later, at dawn, Ned watched from the city gates as Ser Jacelyn Bywater led a column of roughly 250 men, 200 gold cloaks, and 50 knights sworn to Renly or the royal household out of King's Landing on the road north. The men rode behind royal banners depicting the Stag of Baratheon, though many also carried smaller banners of their own houses. They were not a grand army by any means, but they were disciplined enough to handle raiders and show the Riverlands that the crown had not abandoned them. A light drizzle misted the morning air, turning the road muddy. Ned stood beneath the shelter of an archway, cloak pulled close. A sense of mingled pride and worry gnawed at him. Pride that the crown was acting to protect its people, worry that Tywin might see this as a personal affront and respond with overwhelming force. Such was the precarious balance. Peter Baelish sidled up, leaning on a stone post. Off they go, gallant as can be. Let us hope the hills and streams of the Riverlands do not run red with their blood. Indeed, Ned muttered. If Tywin calls off these raids, they can stand down. If he escalates, we do what we must. Baelish affected a sigh. Oh, Ned. Playing hero once more. For your sake, I hope the realm sees your intentions as pure. The Queen might well spin this as you meddling in a private dispute or paint you as an aggressor. Perception is everything. Ned fixed him with a steely look. I'll not stand idle while innocent folk are tormented. If that's meddling, so be it. Baelish gave an elegant shrug. As you say. In any case, I have a letter from your good wife, Lady Catelyn, if you've the time to read it. It was delivered quietly. Perhaps you might prefer to see it in private. Ned's heart quickened. A letter from Cat? They had shared only a sparse exchange of ravens since she went traveling, for he knew she had gone to treat with certain parties, though details were scarce and the politics of the moment overshadowed personal tidings. I will, he said, holding out his hand. The master of coin handed over a sealed parchment, the seal of House Tully pressed in red wax. I'll leave you to it. And do try not to do anything rash, Lord Stark. The city is tense enough without you stoking fresh fires. With that, Baelish spun on his heel and walked away, his footsteps echoing under the arch. Ned opened the parchment carefully, scanning the lines in Cat's familiar script. My dearest Ned, I write from a small holdfast in the Riverlands. Our roads have proven treacherous, yet the cause that drives me is urgent. I have learned much of the Lannisters' intrigues and of movements that might threaten not only our house but all of Westeros. I cannot commit too much to parchment for fear of interception, but trust that my steps are guided by love for you and for our children. I have taken certain measures to secure our position, though they may seem bold or even reckless. In time, you will know all. Until then, guard yourself well. The Lannisters are cunning and Tywin's ambitions grow by the day. Know that you are in my thoughts always. Remind Sansa, Arya, and the rest that I love them dearly. Remain strong. I hope to return soon, or send further word. This realm needs you, Ned, as does our family. Yours, Catelyn. He read the letter twice, unsettled by the secrecy. Cat was not one for idle risks. If she was hinting she had undertaken bold steps, it could mean she had gone in search of allies or some proof that would reshape the conflict. She might even be investigating the matter of Joffrey's lineage, though Ned dearly hoped not. That road led to a firestorm. Still, she had always been a loyal wife and a formidable partner. If she believed her journey necessary, Ned trusted she had her reasons. He folded the letter and tucked it into his tunic, the weight of it pressing over his heart. Alone for a moment, he gazed at the departing column of men again, their banners receding into the soft drizzle. He thought of the realm's precarious peace and the knowledge that his wife was out there, somewhere in the Riverlands, risking unknown dangers. The responsibility of protecting them all weighed on him like a leaden cloak. A fine spray of rain flecked his hair as he turned to head back into the city. He carried with him Catelyn's words, the sting of the Lannisters' threat, and the unwavering resolve that had guided him this far. If Tywin Lannister continued down this road, Ned would not shrink from meeting him. Honor demanded that he uphold Robert's final wish, that the realm remain intact under young Joffrey's reign. Yet each passing day only underscored how tenuous that goal was. He returned to the Red Keep determined to stand firm, no matter the cost. War whispered at the edges of the land, stirring and restless, awaiting its moment to burst forth. And in the center stood Eddard Stark, regent of the Seven Kingdoms, praying his shield, Robert's last decree, would be enough to keep the swords at bay. A week passed. At first, no news came from the Riverlands, no ravens, no reports of major skirmishes. Ned dared to hope that the presence of royal soldiers might have made Tywin pause. Then, on a fog-shrouded morning, a haggard messenger stumbled through the gates of the Keep, demanding to see the Lord Regent. When Ned summoned him to the small council chambers, the man collapsed on the floor, near faint with exhaustion. "My lord," he gasped. "From Ser Jacelyn Bywater. An urgent message. The raiders attacked at night, caught them near an outlying hamlet. They wore Lannister colors indeed. Our men engaged them, but the enemy melted away after striking. Casualties are not great, but Bywater says it's only the beginning. The local folk claim multiple roving bands are out there." Ned tensed. "Is there proof these men hail from Tywin's host?" The messenger fumbled out a crumpled parchment, which Ned seized. It bore Bywater's scrawling hand. "Lord Regent, we have skirmished with armed men bearing the Lion of Lannister on their surcoats. They attack swiftly, then vanish into the night. The local smallfolk insist these raiders come from the mountains near the Golden Tooth, no doubt mustered by Tywin. We have driven them off for now, but we cannot be everywhere at once. The threat is real. Lord Tywin must be orchestrating these attacks, perhaps testing our resolve. We stand ready for further orders but request reinforcements if possible. Signed, Ser Jacelyn Bywater." Ned turned to the small council members present. Varys, Baelish, Pycelle. "There we have it, open raids by Lannister soldiers. We must demand an immediate end, or brand Tywin and his bannermen traitors. The question is how to proceed." Baelish's face was unreadable. "If you brand Tywin a traitor, you invite the full might of House Lannister upon us." Varys nodded. "True, and that might be exactly what he wants. War fought on his terms, near his territory, with King's Landing dangerously undermanned." Pycelle trembled. We cannot simply call Lord Tywin a traitor. He is the grandfather of our king." Ned's fist clenched around the parchment. "Then how do we stop him? Must we let him terrorize the Riverlands without consequence?" A tense silence fell. Then Baelish broke it. "A strategic approach, Lord Regent. You might send an ultimatum. Demand Tywin attend the royal court to account for these raids within a specified time. If he refuses, or if the raids continue, we can call upon the other great houses to denounce him. That way, it's not just you proclaiming him traitor, it's the realm's consensus. The Lannisters would face isolation if they do not comply." Ned considered the idea. House Tyrell might support such a move, if only to keep the Lannisters in check. The Vale might remain aloof, but the North would stand with me, as would the Riverlands. Dorne. Well, that's uncertain. He glanced at Varys. "Does your knowledge suggest Dorne would remain neutral?" Varys spread his soft hands. "Prince Doran Martell is cautious, seldom rushing to war. If the Lannisters appear in the wrong, Dorne might side with the crown in exchange for certain concessions." Baelish smirked. "So bribes, in other words. We can cross that bridge when we come to it." Ned exhaled. "Then let us do exactly as you suggest, issue a royal summons to Tywin Lannister, commanding him to appear before the king in a fortnight to answer for these raids. If he fails to come, or if the raids persist, we'll have cause to declare him an enemy of the crown." Pycelle shuffled forward. "Shall we present this to the king, or the queen, before sending it?" Ned felt a headache throbbing. "Yes, we must. Though I suspect Joffrey will not care. The queen will try to block it. But so be it." Baelish laughed quietly. "Your determination is admirable." "Very well, my Lord Regent, I shall help draft the summons. We'll use the proper language to convey both courtesy and menace. Then you can bring it to Joffrey for his seal." Ned almost wished Robert were here, brandishing his warhammer and smashing anything that defied him. But Robert was gone. All that remained was a fragile letter of fractious boyking and the vow Ned had made to protect the realm. "Yes," he said, resigned. "Let us do it quickly." Cersei was livid. Ned realized that within moments of entering her private solar, summons in hand. She stood by a window overlooking the city, blonde hair catching the afternoon light, posture taut as a drawn bow. Jaime lounged in a chair off to the side, picking at his nails. Joffrey was absent again, presumably bored by politics. "You presume," Cersei hissed, rounding on Ned as soon as he entered. "You dare to call my father a traitor for protecting our lands?" Ned drew a steadying breath. "The raids are not happening in the Westerlands, Your Grace. They are happening in the Riverlands against villages sworn to House Tully and thus the crown. Your father's men have no right to protect themselves by burning innocent farms. This is an act of aggression." She fixed him with a glare that could cut steel. "You know nothing of how the mountain clans near the Golden Tooth have menaced our borders. My father must keep his people safe. Safe? By crossing into Tully territory to loot and destroy. Ned countered. No. If Tywin has some grievance, let him come to court and state it plainly, not wage a covert war. Jaime interjected, leaning forward with a lazy smile. The Riverlands belong to the Tullys, yes, but the Tullys owe fealty to the crown. My father might argue he was simply purging bandits or ensuring they don't cross into our lands. War zones can be messy, Stark. Not everything is as neat as you'd like. Ned's fists clenched at his sides, but he kept his voice even. Then Lord Tywin has nothing to fear by heeding the crown's summons. Let him appear in King's Landing, speak his piece, and prove these raids were misunderstandings. If they continue, I will have no choice but to brand him an outlaw. Jaime laughed, a hard sound. That's a bold threat from a man with only a fraction of the gold cloaks at his disposal. How long do you think you'd hold King's Landing if the Lannisters marched in force? Ned stared back at Jaime, unflinching. Long enough for the rest of the realm to rise against them. Your father is not the only lord with armies, Kingslayer. And if you think the North or the Riverlands or even the Reach would stand by while the Lannisters seize power, you are mistaken. Cersei's eyes flashed with fury. Do not forget my son sits the throne, Stark. Any house that rises against us commits treason. You claim to speak for Joffrey, but you consistently undermine him. I speak for him because I am regent, by King Robert's command, Ned retorted. I have endured your interference, your father's machinations, all in hopes of preserving peace. I will not allow the Riverlands to be ravaged without consequence. A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant caw of gulls outside the window. Jaime rested a hand on the pommel of his sword. Cersei's knuckles whitened as she clutched the windowsill. The moment stretched taut. If either side escalated further, swords might be drawn. Ned felt the old soldier's instincts stirring in his gut. But he did not back down. At length, Cersei spoke, her voice low and resonant with threat. I will speak with my son. If he consents to sign your summons, I will not forbid it. But mark me well, Stark. If you drive my father to open war, the blood of this realm will be on your hands. And I promise you, House Stark will not escape unscathed. Ned met her gaze evenly. Better that than to abandon the people of the Riverlands to Lannister cruelty. I'll expect an answer from Joffrey by day's end. He turned on his heel, refusing to show the tension roiling in his chest. As he left, he heard Jaime's derisive chuckle, and Cersei's voice, cold as winter. He will destroy himself, and I'll watch him do it. The door closed behind Ned, sealing in the Queen's fury. He let out a slow breath. Another line crossed, another threat exchanged. They drew ever nearer to a point of no return, where either the Lannisters would yield or the Seven Kingdoms would explode into civil war. Yet Ned could not, in good conscience, do anything else. His vow to Robert demanded he defend the king's subjects. If Tywin Lannister wanted to break the realm to feed his ambitions, Ned Stark would stand in his way, come what may. By evening, word arrived that Joffrey, prodded by his mother, no doubt, had stamped his seal on the summons, though he reportedly called it a waste of my time. The messenger who brought the news added that the king had done so while snickering that if Tywin refused, "We'll chop off his head." Ned found that both ironic and unhelpful. Still, the official royal stamp was enough. The next morning, the letter was sent by Raven and by Ryder to Casterly Rock, demanding Tywin Lannister's presence within 2 weeks to explain himself. A faint sense of relief mingled with the dread that Tywin might not bother to respond. Days rolled by. The tension in the Red Keep mounted. The Queen went about her routine with an air of icy composure, ignoring Ned at meals and small council sessions alike. Jaime Lannister wore his armor more often as though preparing for a fight at any moment. Joffrey continued to flaunt his status, hosting petty amusements in the courtyard, a jester forced to fight with wooden swords, dogs made to chase squealing animals while the king laughed. Sansa tried to keep the peace, sitting with Joffrey and praising his every gesture, but the boy's mood swings were unpredictable. Arya, fed up, kept to herself in the back corridors, practicing her needlework with a real needle out of sight. Ned had to remind her daily not to provoke the royal household. At last, after a full night, a raven came from Casterly Rock. Its words were brief and formal, bearing Tywin's seal. To the Lord Regent, Eddard Stark, I have received your summons and note the accusations therein. I shall attend the court at King's Landing within the fortnight to address these matters. Let it not be said that House Lannister shuns the rightful king. Expect me with an escort befitting my station. Signed, Tywin of House Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, Warden of the West. Ned read the message twice. The fortnight was nearly half spent, but Tywin promised to come within what remained of it. If the man kept his word, he might arrive in a week or slightly more, presumably leading a large retinue. Ned had no illusions. This was Tywin's way of entering the city in force, enough to intimidate but not so many as to be openly a siege. He could practically feel the looming shadow of Lannister gold. Still, it was better than immediate warfare. Ned informed the small council at once. Varys nodded quietly as if he had expected no less. Baelish raised an eyebrow and remarked that the escort might be an army in all but name. Renly shrugged and said he'd see if more knights could be stationed in the capital, just in case. Pycelle blustered about the need to show respect for the father of the queen, but Ned paid him little mind. The die was cast. Tywin would come. Preparations for Tywin's arrival consumed the Red Keep. The king's retinue made plans to greet him at the city gate with due pomp, not wanting to provide any excuse for Lannister rage. Joffrey, ironically, seemed excited by the prospect of his grandfather's visit. The boy all but gloated that Tywin's arrival would show the realm who truly supports the crown. Ned took that as yet another sign of how thoroughly Cersei's father would overshadow any attempt at real justice. But he held fast, resolved to confront Tywin with the evidence of raids and demand restitution or face condemnation from the entire realm. The day that Tywin was expected dawned bright and stiflingly hot, unusual for autumn. The roads near the Lion Gate bustled with throngs of curious onlookers hoping to glimpse the Lannister lord's entrance. City watch officers tried to keep order, shoving people back when they crowded too close. Banners of the Staglion heraldry fluttered from the walls in Joffrey's honor. Inside the gate, a welcoming party gathered. Joffrey in regal attire, the queen at his side, Jaime Lannister in his white Kingsguard cloak, Ned Stark in formal Stark colors, a few other lords of note. Gold cloaks stood by the walls, pikes at the ready, while overhead gulls circled in lazy arcs. Around midday, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon, signals of a sizable column. Trumpets sounded from the watchers on the walls. Gradually, the shapes resolved into lines of mounted knights and men-at-arms, all bearing the gold lion on a crimson field, Lannister colors bright as fresh blood in the sunlight. They marched with disciplined precision, a show of force. Perhaps 500 strong, though it was hard to be certain at a glance. At their head rode Tywin Lannister himself, unmistakable in gilded armor that caught the sun and seemed to blaze. He was tall, erect, his green eyes sharp beneath pale eyebrows. His face was stern, the lines carved by years of unyielding authority. A cloth of gold cloak draped from his shoulders. As he neared, the watchers fell silent. Even the throngs in the street hushed with awe or fear. At the Lion Gate, Joffrey stepped forward, flanked by Jaime on one side and Cersei on the other. Ned stood behind them along with a cluster of counselors. Tywin halted his horse, taking in the scene with a dispassionate gaze. Then he swung down, landing lightly for a man past his middle years. He moved with the grace of a panther. Cersei went to him, bowing her head, then leaned in to speak softly. Tywin answered in low tones, too quiet for Ned to catch. Then, in a clear voice meant for all, Joffrey called out, "Welcome to King's Landing, Lord Tywin Lannister, my beloved grandsire, Warden of the West. We are pleased you have answered our summons." Tywin bowed, though his expression remained cool. "Your Grace, I live to serve the crown." Ned stepped forward, ignoring the glances from Lannister knights. "My Lord Lannister, the realm trusts you come with good intentions to answer for the disturbances in the Riverlands and restore peace." Tywin turned to meet Ned's gaze. His eyes were chips of green ice, betraying no warmth. "Lord Regent," he replied, voice measured. "I come at the king's behest, not yours. I shall speak with his grace about these so-called disturbances, which are, I trust, mere misunderstandings." Ned felt the stares of the crowd. "In that case, let us proceed to the Red Keep at once, where the king holds court." "As you command," Tywin said, though the faintest edge in his tone suggested he took no orders from Eddard Stark. Then he remounted, gesturing for his knights to follow. With that, the procession entered the city. Joffrey led, flanked by the Queen and Tywin, while Ned found himself riding behind them with Jaime Lannister and a cluster of royal guards. The crowd parted, offering a cautious welcome, some cheers, some uneasy muttering. 500 Lannister men made an impressive sight, the gold lions on their surcoats glinting in the midday glare. Ned studied their expressions and saw discipline, arrogance, a sense of unstoppable might. If Tywin demanded war, he already had enough men to cause trouble inside the city walls. That fear gnawed at Ned's stomach. But so far, Tywin marched in peace, if peace it could be called. They passed through the winding streets, climbing toward the Red Keep's gates. Along the way, Ned glimpsed Sansa and Arya standing on a balcony with a few other noble children, watching. Sansa's eyes were wide with amazement while Arya looked restless. Ned hoped they'd remain safely out of any confrontation. At last, they entered the Red Keep's outer yard. The Lannister knights set up a small encampment just beyond the stables, staking out lines of tents with practiced efficiency. Tywin was escorted inside, accompanied by a score of hand-picked retainers. The rest busied themselves caring for horses or overseeing wagons loaded with crates, likely gifts or provisions. By the time Ned dismounted, the heat had made him sweat beneath his cloak. He gave quick orders to the gold cloaks, telling them to keep watch on the Lannister men, discreetly but diligently. Soon, the entire party ascended into the throne room, torches burning despite the sunlight streaming in. Courtiers packed the side aisles, eager to witness the drama. Joffrey perched on the Iron Throne, golden crown askew on his blonde locks. Cersei stood at his right, Tywin at her side. Ned approached from the left, flanked by Ser Barristan Selmy and a few members of the small council. Jaime joined his father, arms folded, expression smug. Joffrey banged a metal-shod scepter on the throne's arm to call for silence. Lord Tywin, he said in a high voice, the crown bids you speak. There have been complaints about raids in the Riverlands carried out by men in your service. What say you to these accusations? Tywin did not bow. He inclined his head, just barely. Your Grace, I am loyal to the crown and to you, my rightful king. If some men bearing my sigil have caused trouble, it is not at my command. The Westerlands are plagued by brigands who sometimes don stolen colors. My efforts to pacify the region have been misunderstood as aggression. Ned had anticipated something like this. Ser Jacelyn Bywater has fought men who openly declared themselves Lannister bannermen. How do you account for that, my lord? Tywin turned a cold gaze upon Ned. Men often claim to serve a powerful lord when it serves their ends. I cannot control every rogue knight who once rode under a Lannister banner. If they are indeed my former men, then I say punish them for their crimes as you would any bandit. But do not tarnish my name with the misdeeds of outlaws. Joffrey blinked as though trying to parse the logic. Cersei intervened smoothly. You see, my lord's misunderstandings. My father would never defy the king's peace. Clearly these are rogue elements. Perhaps the Riverlords are all too eager to blame House Lannister for any ill that befalls them. A ripple of murmur ran through the hall. Lord Varys, watching from the sidelines, said nothing, but Ned glimpsed a slight tilt of his head that might be skepticism. Renly was absent this day, avoiding the spectacle or perhaps anticipating it might end in frustration. Ned stepped forward. Lord Tywin, your presence here is appreciated. If you give your word that no man in your service will cross into the Riverlands, seize goods, or harm small folk again, we can resolve this matter. Will you swear it before the Iron Throne? Tywin's green eyes locked on Ned. I have no need to swear a negative. I state that I have never ordered such raids. If men do so in my name, they shall be brought to justice. That is all. Ned felt anger rising. Then you do not deny that these men might indeed be Lannister soldiers, only that you did not personally order it? Such careful words, Lord Tywin. Tywin's jaw tightened. Are you calling me a liar, Lord Regent? Ned held his gaze. I call for clarity. If you truly wish to end the raids, then command your bannermen to withdraw from the border, let the Riverlands see peace restored. A hush fell. Tywin's expression hardened to granite. Cersei laid a hand on his arm as if to restrain him. Joffrey, looking from face to face, seemed disconcerted by the rising tension. Jaime's hand drifted to the hilt of his sword, a purely reflexive gesture. Then Tywin spoke, voice resonating. I shall give orders that no knight in Lannister livery is to cross the border without my explicit command. If any are found doing so, they shall answer to me. That is more than sufficient to address your complaints. Will that satisfy you, Lord Stark? Ned recognized the subtlety. Tywin did not promise to remove his army from the region or stand down from readiness. He merely promised not to cross the border unless he deemed it necessary. Yet to push further risked open confrontation. For now, Ned allowed, it satisfies me, provided the raids cease at once. Joffrey, sensing an end, puffed out his chest. Then it is done. My grandfather is innocent of wrongdoing, and this matter is resolved. Let all know the king's justice has prevailed. He tapped the scepter again with a metallic clang, as though concluding a great trial. Ned forced himself to bow, mouth tasting of bitterness. The crowd stirred, some faces relieved, others uncertain. Tywin showed no emotion. Inwardly, Ned fumed. Tywin had danced around direct accountability, but so long as the raids stopped, it might be enough to preserve the fragile peace. Perhaps Bywater's men in the Riverlands could confirm soon if the attacks truly ceased. Cersei cleared her throat. My father will remain in King's Landing for a time, I trust, to ensure no further misunderstandings occur. We will find suitable chambers for him in the Red Keep. A surge of apprehension twisted in Ned's gut. Tywin staying in the capital meant the Lannisters would have a powerful presence at court, one that could overshadow Ned's regency entirely. Yet refusing him lodging would be unthinkable. They were nominally on the same side after all. Of course, Ned said. You are welcome, Lord Tywin. Tywin inclined his head again, still cold. I appreciate the courtesy, Regent. In time we shall see how best to maintain the peace. The unspoken threat lingered in the air, on my terms. Joffrey waved a dismissive hand. Then I grow weary of these matters. The court is adjourned. Grandfather, you must dine with me tonight. Mother, see that the feast is grand. Cersei smiled. Yes, my son. We shall. And that was that. The gathering dispersed, courtiers pouring out in a swirl of speculation. Tywin moved closer to Joffrey, speaking quietly as they left the throne room with Cersei and Jaime on either side. Ned watched them go, heartsick. The Lannisters had claimed a victory of sorts, deflecting blame for the raids without truly dismantling their threat. Their lion banner now stood in the heart of the capital. What now? Ned wondered. The game had grown more dangerous with Tywin's presence. The next move might well spark open conflict, or it might lull the realm into thinking the worst was over. As Ned turned to exit, Varys appeared beside him, whispering, Beware, my Lord Regent. You have cornered the lion in its den. Sometimes that is when it's most deadly. Ned's gaze lingered on the corridor where Tywin had vanished. I have no choice, Varys. Peace must be kept. Or the realm bleeds. Varys smiled sadly. May the gods protect us all then. For you have forced a confrontation none can walk away from lightly. Together they walked out, hearts heavy with the knowledge that the so-called resolution might be only the calm before a storm. Ned kept his head high, resolved to see this through as best he could. If Robert had wanted him to save Joffrey's throne, he would try. Though with Tywin's shadow now looming over King's Landing, the cost of that promise might soon prove more than any man could bear.